Hi, everybody. I'm Charity Counts. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Midwest Museums. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate our 2025 Distinguished Career Award recipient, Dr. Elena Gonzales, Curator of Civic Engagement and Social Justice at the Chicago History Museum. Before we begin our program, I invite my co-host for this evening, DeAndrea Matthews, to offer a land acknowledgement.
Good evening, everyone. My name is DeAndrea Matthews. I am the Vice President of Access and Community Engagement for the Detroit Zoological Society, and I also serve on the Board of Directors for AMM. In this era of virtual meetings, when digital spaces may substitute our physical sense of place, it is important to redirect our attention to the land we each occupy in this moment and honor the Indigenous people who have called it home. Because I am located in Detroit, Michigan, I invite you to join me in acknowledging the Anishinaabe Nation, including the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi tribes, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, DeAndrea. I have a few housekeeping notes before we begin the program. First of all, we invite you to participate today as you are comfortable. This means that you can have your video on or off, but please keep your audio muted until we ask you to unmute. There will be moments to clap and cheer and get loud for Elena. You may also use your Zoom reaction tools like the applause or the celebration. You can use the chat to comment and react. You can also just wave and snap your fingers if you prefer over clapping. We have Zoom's built-in transcription feature turned on today. You can turn on captions using the CC button in your Zoom window. It should be available in your tools there. We also have an ASL interpreter with us today. I've added a spotlight to our interpreter, our hosts, and the recipient to ensure that they remain at the top of your screen if you're using gallery view, or are the primary videos on your screen in presenter view. You can toggle between those two views with your menu in the Zoom window as well. Also, we do have, for those of you getting to know AMM for the first time today, I'd like to provide a little bit of background information about our organization. We were founded in 1927, which makes us one of the oldest, very first museum associations in the United States. We serve an 8-state region, including Illinois, where our recipient is located. We host many virtual programs each year, but the awards are my favorite. It's a joy to celebrate all of our honorees through these events that bring together both their peers in the museum field, as well as staff, colleagues, coworkers, bosses, family, and friends. Now I'll pass the mic back to DeAndrea, who will get the awards program started. And DeAndrea, I just want to let you know that Erica has just joined.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right. Well, the Distinguished Career Award recognizes individuals at mid to late stage careers whose leadership, vision, mentorship, and creativity have had a positive impact on those around them or resulted in lasting change for their institutions. We are thrilled to recognize the visionary leadership of Dr. Elena Gonzales through this award. Throughout her 20-plus years in the museum profession, from Chicago to Washington, D.C., Elena has been devoted to community collaboration and advancing social justice. At the Chicago History Museum, Elena is spearheading Aquí on Chicago, a project and exhibition stemming from a protest by high school students from Instituto Justice and Leadership Academy that called attention to the lack of Latino, Latina, Latinx representation in the museum's exhibitions. Elena is a dedicated and fearless scholar whose thoughtful approach to community engagement and storytelling has nurtured connections and uplifted underrepresented voices. Tonight, we'll get to learn more about Elena's vision and motivation for Aquí on Chicago, how she's using storytelling to nurture community connections, and chat about museums and trust. At this time, we're going to invite comments from Erica, Elena's director, as we get tonight's celebration started. So I'll pass the mic over to Erica.
DeAndrea, thank you so much for lending me the virtual microphone to say a few words about my absolutely amazing colleague, Elena Gonzales. Elena joined CHM in 2021, and I had just joined in 2020. And her passion, that fearlessness that you spoke about, is measured out equally with so much empathy and care and commitment to community engagement. And at her time at the Chicago History Museum, she has compelled the museum to change the way that we operate, to ensure that we have ourselves prepared to go about the business of engaging in topics that we may not have covered before. She is a light in the fog. I am eternally grateful to call her colleague because she has lifted up my own practice and poured so much into learning and engagement, which is my area of the museum. And together we are excited to move forward with her guidance, the pathways that she has set, and this commitment to telling inclusive history. This past weekend, Elena hosted a teacher workshop for us, and I had a chance to, sing her praises with our teachers. And the takeaway that I always come back to is that Elena, because of her experience, her personality, her passion for history, is perfectly poised to do this type of work, perfectly positioned to serve as lead, as a lead really in this industry, in this museum world that we all inhabit. And I am excited and honored to learn from her, learn with her, move forward with her as a guide at the Chicago History Museum. And with that, I can turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much for those words, Erica. We appreciate that. Next, we would like to invite Elena's nominator, Paulina Bugeaud, to say some words as well. So, Paulina, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. I just want to say it has been an honor and a privilege to work with Elena. I echo everything that Erica has said. And when I submitted Elena's nomination back in May, our latest exhibition, Aquí in Chicago, was not open yet. It was coming together. It was being built. It was being created. And now that I had it was an honor to be there the moment the exhibition opened for the community that it is intended for. And I don't think I've ever seen so many people at an exhibition opening at the Chicago History Museum, and I don't think I've seen so much joy together in a room. So it was just incredible to see Elena's passion, just bringing all these folks together in this beautiful moment. And we've been receiving a few survey responses. So I just wanted to read a few survey responses from folks that have visited the exhibition. One is, I teach in CPS and have over the years had many Latina students who even in school felt they weren't represented. I teach social studies, so this exhibition is helping me enhance my own curriculum. Another says, I am Mexican, but not from Chicago. Learning about the struggles of my people in the city was a very personal and important experience. Another says, I learned about Rudy Lozano, a community activist. As a new Chicagoan hoping to have a future in community engagement in Chicago, he is my new role model. And finally, for the question, what did you appreciate most from your visit to the exhibition? Feeling seen, how the exhibition was set into the reality of the lived experience of being Latino and an appreciation of our significance and culture. And, I think that sums it up, but it goes so much beyond that. We are so thrilled to have Elena here with us at the Chicago History Museum because she's really creating change within these walls. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you, Paulina. Those comments, just phenomenal. It's wonderful to hear the impact that she's having and she has had already. So it's time to celebrate. I now invite everyone with us today to unmute or to use your Zoom reaction icons like the one that I just used. There we go. And join me in a round of applause for Dr. Elena Gonzales.
Woo!
Woo-hoo! Woo! Thank you. Thank you. So, Elena, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I would. Thank you so much, DeAndrea. First of all, wow, where to start? It's so overwhelming the amount of love that can be on a Zoom screen. I have never experienced this before, and it's very special. I will start by saying thank you to AMM for this beautiful award, which I have right here. It's actually the most beautiful award that I've ever seen given by a professional association, so thank you for that. It's glass, it's very weighty, and I'm sure it could serve a lot of purposes. Thank you, Charity, for organizing this beautiful event, which again is kind of taking my breath away. Um, I I have to thank Paulina for nominating me and for sharing those very kind remarks and the survey responses, which are very validating to hear. It was really kind of you to do that. So thank you for that. And Erica, it's extremely humbling to even try to thank you because you are so special and your professional work is at such a high level. So to receive those kind of comments from you is as I said on Saturday, really something that I had to physically stop myself from scribbling down everything that you were saying so that I could carry it around with me because that's what I do. And I'm just thinking, if only the love in the Zoom room were something that I could bottle, it could fuel me through many long, dark winter days of work. So I'm really grateful. I also want to thank Grace because I've never had an ASL interpreter before. So thank you so much. It's extremely wonderful to know that this presentation will be accessible. And thank you to my friends and family and colleagues who are here with us today. I do want to highlight Rebecca, who's one of my colleagues in curatorial, who has also worked on Aquí in Chicago with me. And it's really exciting, to be able to celebrate today with folks who could not be in the Quad Cities over the summer, like my family members. So that is really, really wonderful. Since summer, a lot of things have happened, right? As Paulina was saying, we opened Aquí in Chicago, and the opening day was everything we could have hoped for. We had 1,300 visitors. People were visiting in 3 and 4 generation groups. So even today, people are sending me photos. They'll say, "Oh, I visited Aquí in Chicago with my family," and it's a family of like 15, 20 people. So that's what's been happening. The Ballet Folklorico dancers wearing the ensemble that they so generously donated to the History Museum for our permanent collection, packed into the gallery, clustering around the ensemble in the case, but wearing the same thing on their bodies. That was amazing to see. Babies eating hojarasca cookies that have not been available in Chicago for 15 years. Also amazing to see. Eating tamales in the museum that I've only ever seen in a bar before. And just seeing lenders and artists and all sorts of folks, as Paulina was saying, see themselves in the gallery for the first time was very, that's what we've been working so hard for. So in Quad Cities over the summer, I said, it's always really special to have your work acknowledged in any way, right? But this award is particularly meaningful to me because it comes at a time when our actual federal government has been making my own work and the work of so many of my colleagues illegal, which is something I never thought I would say or experience. To have my work on this project in particular in the crosshairs of the administration, to have Operation Midway Blitz taking place during the opening, the entire thing is making me feel like, work that I think should be very basic feels revolutionary. I don't think of my work as revolutionary. I just think of it as basic, ethical, responsible work. So at this time, the reaction that we've been receiving, as I mentioned, has really been validating the work that we've been doing. And the AMM award is certainly a really important part of that. Somebody recently asked me, what is the most fulfilling thing about my work on Aquí? And I was saying, that it's these moments that we keep having where people say, they're comfortable at CHM for the first time, or they feel welcome for the first time. And I wanted to share, like Paulina, a couple of things that people had recently said to me in writing, which of course is my favorite way to receive a compliment, because then I can save it forever and ever in my little folder. One of the performers at the opening, a very saucy Puerto Rican woman named Ivelisse Diaz, who's also one of our advisors and the director of Escuelita Bombera de Corazon here in Chicago, said to the whole audience, if you've ever felt like you needed to straighten up or act a certain way to be welcome in a museum, put that aside. You don't need to feel that way here. You can come as you are. Also, a child who was there with his parent said to his mom, I love this, Mom. I feel like I'm home. I mean, I just don't even know what to say to that, except thank you for writing it down for me. So my work is actually about making museums work for people, making them accessible to people so we can use them to make our societies more equitable. And we can't do that work unless they're places where people want to be and can be. So there are more museums in the United States than there are McDonald's franchises. And what I'm trying to do is get CHM and all museums to be an engine that we can use to work for equity. So going back to my thoughts about AMM, I feel like by recognizing my work, AMM is saying that this is something that museums should be doing. And right now, that's a very brave statement. So I'm really grateful to the association for standing with me and my many colleagues across the region and the country who are dedicated to this work. And thank you for sending a signal to my colleagues that we will not do Donald Trump's work for him. We will not censor ourselves. We will not erase or whitewash history. And I'm very grateful. Thanks.
That is amazing. So I'm going to turn it over to Charity now, who's going to lead us in our next portion.
Thanks, DeAndrea. I just want to say, I feel like we all probably need a hug after all that, but can we just do another round of applause right now? Thank you, Elena. I've been looking forward to this evening because Elena and I really only got to chat in person very briefly at the conference this summer. And I haven't had a chance to get to know her super well yet myself. I'm excited to get to see you in person again at the museum and see Aquí in Chicago very soon. But tonight, I really want to dig in a little bit more into kind of your career and your motivations and why you do this work. And then let's, talk about your projects and all of that. I want to mention to folks who are here with us today live, you don't have to have questions, but if you do have questions as we go along in this conversation, Elena and I, we're happy to answer them. And you can drop your questions in the chat and I'll, pull them up there. Or if you have comments that you want to share in the chat, I can share them there as well. You can also, because we're in Zoom, you can raise your hand and ask to be called on. You can ask your question yourself. So just know that we'll be open to that throughout this conversation. If there's something that strikes you and you want to ask a question about it, that's all right. But you don't have to. You can also just listen in and enjoy the conversation. I guess, we'll all cheer again at the end. So I'm going to dive in. I do want to start with your career path, Elena, kind of give a little bit of background on you. You've obviously had an amazing last few weeks. So, and we'll get to that. We'll get to Aquí. But let's talk about how you came to do this work, not just as a museum professional, but someone who's focused on civic engagement and social justice work. I know that some museum professionals kind of stumble into their career paths, while others grow up literally visiting museums and dreaming of working in one someday. I was somebody who stumbled in. You might have been somebody who always wanted to do this. So I'm curious, were you one of those kids who always imagined working in a museum and that you wanted to be a curator of some sort or doing this work?
Yeah, I didn't stumble in. I grew up here going to all of our museums in the park here in Chicago my whole childhood, with my family and loving them so much and thinking to myself, oh man, if I could just be in one of these spaces. And I couldn't really think about how I would do that work. I couldn't think of a way that it seemed like uh I don't know, doing the best work that I could be doing. Like I couldn't see how working in a museum space could be the most utilitarian thing I could do, if that makes sense. And then when I was doing a Chicago History Day project in high school, as I say, it was love at first call slip. I went to the Field Museum as I was doing a project on the history of the Field Museum. And if anybody knows about the history of the Field Museum, it was founded, with this name of Marshall Field, but Marshall Field didn't care about the museum at all. He cared about the naming opportunity. The people who cared about what the museum would be, and they had different ideas about what that would be than we do today, but the people who cared about what the museum would be were the curators, right? And they were the ones who had this sort of passionate vision that they were driving through to try to do some type of specific work. And in that space of doing that project, I went up to the research library. I got to talk to their teeny tiny, like 100-year-old librarian who knew everything about everything in Chicago. And I realized that museums could be a space to do work that was valuable, that had to do with today, that was the best work I could do, if that makes sense. So that set me down a particular path, which included working at the National Museum of Mexican Art and doing curatorial work for social justice in practice, which in turn set me down a path of trying to make that my focus.
Okay, that's great. Well, how does it feel? I mean, especially since you grew up in Chicago, going to Chicago museums and now to have been working in them, sort of, and now getting an award, a museum award, like, does it just feel like full circle? Like, did you imagine being here at this stage, especially?
Yeah, when I learned about this award, I was surprised, I was excited. My first thought about a distinguished career award in particular is like, I don't know if I'm ready for this, right? Like I feel like I'm just barely getting started. I have so much work that I want to do still. So yeah, it is it's surreal. And I hope that it's full circle because I hope that many young people who experience museum work today in Chicago will not have these questions of like, I wonder how this could be relevant. I wonder if I could like finagle my way into doing something relevant through museums?
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about now. Well, maybe it's a lot about Aquí in Chicago, right? All right. This is your latest project. I know that you've done a lot of great things in your career, but we're going to focus on this for a little bit. Tell us how this all started.
So, students from Instituto Justice and Leadership Academy, as DeAndrea was saying before, visited the History Museum on a field trip, social studies field trip in 2019. They did not find Latina history anywhere in the museum's nearly 20-year-old, 14,000 square foot central exhibition, Chicago Crossroads of America. And they spent the entire rest of their semester, protesting, meeting with the museum, meeting with community leaders, trying to bring this history into the museum, writing letters, bringing it to social media, news media. And I learned earlier today, I was very excited to learn this actually earlier today, that the buzz around this very protest was part of what brought Erica to the History Museum. So that was like magical. Talk about full circle. That was magical for me to learn. So the students kicked off this movement that inspired this project. And the project includes many different pieces, the most highly visible of which is certainly the exhibition.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about sort of the different components of this.
So right away, we knew that if this were just a flash in the pan, it wouldn't really be answering the students' questions and doing the work that we needed. So we sought to build paths for sustainability into the project. So there are a few different places that that's taking place. One is through building collections around these stories so that we can use these objects and materials to talk about these histories and related histories in the redone Chicago Crossroads of America that we're all working on really hard right now, but it's totally invisible work in that space, but also online in different projects through, our Digital Futures Initiative, oral histories, Indigenous language recordings. Let's see, the Oral History Project is interesting because it is something that we had not originally planned for, but it came out of listening to our advisors. So I can talk more about that. Building the relationships that we did through this project was the key toward creating relationships that could inform the storytelling that will become a part of the new central exhibition at the History Museum. So again, laying the groundwork for how the museum will show up in the next decade, let's say. And then we also did things like, community-based listening sessions where we would ask, how can the History Museum best be a partner in preserving and presenting your history? And we hope to do that in many more communities as well. I feel like I've missed things. Oh, the teen internship program is important as well. And now we have some really neat things to show for our work. The podcast, which is on Spotify and Apple, it's called Building Aquí, and the catalog, which is a really nice, hearty textbook, as opposed to, just a record of the fact that it happened.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I like that I want to shift to this topic of sort of building trust, because you mentioned a few good things, listening sessions. Obviously, there were a lot of steps here, right? There are a lot of things that you all have done or tried and in the process of engaging these young people. Do you feel like anything in particular worked best in kind of breaking down those barriers of communication? Because I feel like, I can only imagine these kids, one, raising their voices and trying to speak up about this, and then getting all that traction, and then expressing themselves. That takes a lot of courage and effort. But then if you finally get to the point of being able to have a conversation about what it is you want to see at this museum and how you want to see change, when there wasn't really as much trust there, there's a lot to work on. And so I just kind of wonder if there were particular components that worked best at kind of sort of building that bridge, right? Connecting you all and be able to have real conversation about that.
Prior to 2021, when I joined the History Museum, some of my colleagues, specifically in the education department, began building relationships with the students at IJLA Rudy High School, the students who initially kicked off the project. And even with all of the amazing groundwork that they did, when I came on the scene, and I think, partly this is a looks thing, right? But when I came on the scene as a white woman in this job, as opposed to my colleagues of color who'd previously been working with the teens and who are professionals with specific expertise in working with teens, it should be said. When I came on the scene, I had to re-interview with the students for my job. And I had to do that multiple times. So every time that I met with the students initially in that first year of the project, I was incrementally building trust with them. That's how relationship building works, right? Really slowly and incrementally. And I had to find ways of like in my line of work, right? I think sometimes the way that I look is as a liability because people automatically assume that they can't trust me, which is totally understandable and I deeply respect. And I try to come straight to the point. I tried to meet the students where they were and demonstrate to them that I understood, even though our lived experiences are extremely different, that I understood their expertise to be real and that I wanted to use my museum skills to elevate their expertise and the wisdom of their questions. And again, use my museum expertise to seek answers to their questions that we could share with Chicago. Now, the teen engagement didn't stop with those original students because we built out that internship program. And because students were self-selecting to be in the program, we didn't have the same hurdle where I felt like I had to re-interview for my job. On the contrary, we brought them in. Each new cohort knew that we were excited to work with them, that we valued their expertise. And as we developed through the season with them, we would show them time and again how we were listening to them, taking their contributions into account and making changes or adjustments along the way as needed.
That's great. I feel like Laurel's got a really good similar follow-up question related to this because I imagine there's a sense of urgency around these kind of challenges as they come up. And I'm sure these students, after having, worked toward getting your attention, getting the museum's attention to make change, they probably want to see things happen as quickly as possible. So Laurel's question is, were there things that the CHM did in short term to address the students' concerns or to show them progress on the things that are invisible work behind the scenes?
I don't think that even though the museum did certain things like commit to doing something, right? Like remove the lowrider from the lobby, which had been a concern to the students because they felt it was stereotyping their communities. Like putting a curator on the project and starting meetings. Even though there were very tangible steps happening very early on, I don't think the students actually believed that they were going to see real tangible change until the doors opened on the exhibition. And I completely understand and respect that. And I felt the same, honestly. So part of that is that the students needed to see not just tangible steps, but also work sustained over the course of years. And you can't do work sustained over the course of years without actually taking years to do it, if that makes sense. So there's a certain amount of show aptitude that needs to be put in play for people to understand that the work is ongoing.
Yeah, okay. I know that you approach everything with great intention. Did you have any missteps? Like, were there moments where you're like, ooh, maybe we should have done this a little bit differently?
Interesting. So, okay, the first one is not a misstep, but it's something that would have been a misstep if I had not had my advisors. So I mentioned the oral history project. When I first came to the museum to start working on this, I met with Peter Alter, our colleague in curatorial, who's the director of our Studs Terkel Oral History Center. And he said, am I planning an oral history project together with this exhibition project? And I was like, absolutely not. That is way more work than we have the bandwidth to do. And the more that I heard from advisors, the more I heard, we need an oral history project. We need an oral history project. And within a few short months, I had made a total about face. And I was like, anyway, oral history project, let's make it happen. And so we started out with a small, it is a small project. We hope to increase the size of it with additional funding as we go along. But that would have been a misstep had I not listened to our advisors. And that's why we have advisors. As to actual real missteps, I think my biggest misstep, and And it's interesting to me because I came into this job knowing a lot about the museum. I wrote about the museum in my dissertation. I read an institutional history of the museum. I wrote institutional history of the museum, and I researched in the museum's archives for many years. So, and I had interviewed so many different staff members across the museum before they came to me asking me to do this work. So my misstep was not getting more information, even more information about CHM before taking the job. For example, I did not ask about committed funding and fundraising plans in a detailed way. I wish I had done that.
That's a really great point. Well, and it's possible too. Museums don't always know what they don't know, right? like what needs to happen. So thanks for sharing that. I do appreciate you. I know it's a celebration mode here, but it's always good to kind of look at things that we might have done differently as a part of this conversation. Okay, I want to ask about the relationships today, right? So you already mentioned it before. There's a lot happening, and particularly in Chicago. You know, you're in the middle of a major, well, I don't know, maybe I caught wind that perhaps ICE is shifting to St. Louis or something, but we're in the middle in the Midwest of mobilization of military and border patrol agents who are particularly targeting undocumented individuals from Central and South America. I can only imagine the impact that has had on people who are community partners and advisors and these teens who are engaged in your project and this work. And that it might have an impact on their relationship with you and the museum and just how they want to, converse. I'm so happy to hear about how the opening of Aquí went and how people are feeling about that. I'm sure it brings them a lot of joy, but I'm curious from your perspective, like, what do those relationships look like right now? What conversations are happening and how is the museum kind of connecting with them beyond the project, right? During this time.
I think telling the histories that we are doing now within Aquí is really deepening the nascent trust that our partners have for us. I am very grateful for that. And I think that, many people told me directly that they were waiting to see the doors open on the exhibition before they passed judgment or altered their opinion of the History Museum, which, again, totally valid. I feel the same. So I think that's been a positive, and I think people have been very encouraged and within that trusting space about how the museum has shown up with this content in the current moment of Operation Midway Blitz. And I think, the federal engagement in Chicago around Operation Midway Blitz has offered some interesting and weird experiences for us. On the one hand, as we've talked to colleagues across the city about their preparedness for hostile maneuvers by ICE in museum spaces, as colleagues have experienced across the country. Here in Chicago, National Puerto Rican Museum, in LA, Japanese American National Museum, folks are experiencing these incursions by ICE in the museum space. And so as we talk to colleagues around the area about these experiences, the range of preparedness from museum to museum was very different. And I think, I and some of my colleagues felt like perhaps, the History Museum was not as well prepared as it could have been. I think we were interested to see that it was also not the least well prepared museum in Chicago. Fortunately, we have not had to encounter that scenario yet, and we very much hope that will continue to be the case. But since you mentioned trust, I do think, as Operation Midway Blitz was looming on the horizon, advisors were reaching out to us saying, the museum has to get its ducks in a row. You have to be prepared for this. Like, what is the museum doing to keep people safe? And I think while I am very enthusiastic about the trusting response we've had to the doors opening, I don't think that we have fully and successfully answered that question. And so I think there's more work to do, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's true for every museum that's making efforts. I think it's an evolving situation. I appreciate you sharing that. Um, let's talk a little bit more about, your social justice community engagement work. I know that that's hard work to do. But it challenges you, right? It takes a lot of energy, faith and patience, cultural competency, and you probably have stuff you've got to do every day beyond all that, right? So it's a lot to take on. And I think that when there are new roadblocks like what's happening in the city, it certainly makes progression challenging, right? Um, I'm curious how you stay motivated in this work and take care of yourself and, keep your energy up for all of that.
My husband is in the room and he is a key part of that, right? Taking care of me and allowing this work to happen. However, I think, when I was little, I was not very athletic, and I would feel really badly about, in gym class, we were made to run, and I hated to run. And my pop would always tell me, start slow and taper off, which, is a joke. But I think the answer that I would give to your question outside of, I rely on Simon's goodwill to get me through the day. Other than that, I think it's starting slow and tapering off. I did not sign up for a rush job on this project, nor would I sign up for that in general. The History Museum asked me to open this project in fall of 2023, and I said, that's not reasonable. If you want to throw something up quickly, you don't need me for that. And they were actually very generous to listen to that and give me the additional time that I needed to do the project the way that I saw fit. But I think working slow and carefully is what I like to do. I like to do planning, right? And take methodical steps and not run around like a chicken with my head cut off. I also, try to maintain really strong boundaries around work and not work when I'm not at work. That's easier said than done. Some nights I get more sleep than others, but I try to, get away from work, get with my kids, get with Simon, get with our family, get with our friends, and completely disengage. And then I find that, on the night shift, right, when we're not looking at the problem, that's often when inspiration can strike. Often when we are disengaged, that's when something will come to address a problem or a concern.
Right. It's good. It's a good reminder to make sure we have that space because we do get good ideas then, even when you're off the clock. I appreciate you sharing, all of that, and I'm glad also to hear that the History Museum has offered you a bit of agency in your work and to kind of guide that schedule. I know that building these relationships can take that much time, so rushing through it doesn't help anything. We're going to need to start wrapping up here, but I was wondering if you could share maybe where you're seeking inspiration these days, whether it's for your work at Chicago History or for other things that might be helpful inspiration for others who are considering this kind of work or making changes at their institutions or just looking for inspiration overall.
So I feel like inspiration, like I was saying, kind of comes when I'm not looking for it rather than when I am. So, for example, the other day, our daughter is on the school paper. She's in 5th grade, and we live in Evanston. So the mayor of Evanston, where we live, came to the school paper, and the kids were allowed to offer questions for the mayor. And our daughter's questions were very They cut to the quick. They were like, Mayor Biss, what do you think about the activity of ICE agents in Evanston? Mayor Biss, what would you change about Evanston? So I find inspiration in the brave, creative thinking of my kids and in beauty in the natural world and in museums. And I would say when it comes to advice for colleagues, I would say, prune what's not serving. Choose the priorities, work toward the priorities. You don't have to do everything. You can't do everything. So focus in on what you are going to do and do that thing.
That's amazing advice. And also, the kids are going to be all right. Is all I keep thinking to myself. Thanks for that too. Before we wrap, I just wanted to, mention you have a book, Exhibitions for Social Justice. I'm going to drop a link to it in the chat. I'm sure you get asked about advice and all of that, in all kinds of ways. But this book seems like a good resource for people who are looking for that kind of advice. Can you just give us a very brief summary of what they'll find in that? And I'll drop it in the chat here.
The book is about the ways that we can use the space inside the gallery to work for social justice. And I think it works for other non-traditional education spaces as well. But it's really about the tools that we can use to work with what we have in our brains and bodies to engage people in social justice work.
Okay, awesome. Well, there you have it. It's in the chat here. Elena, maybe before we go, you can always drop your email address in the chat too if you want people to be able to reach out. I do want to pass the mic back to DeAndrea to wrap up the formal program today. And after that, Elena, if you could stay on, and Paulina and Erica too, maybe for a quick photo at the end, that'd be awesome. DeAndrea, I'm going to pass it back to you to wrap things up and cheer on Elena one more time.
All right. Well, thank you. Congratulations once again to Elena. Let's all unmute one more time for a final round of applause. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. To everyone listening at home or at work, we hope that this event has brought you some joy as well as inspiration at the end of your day. This concludes our series of awards events for AMM. Look for the recordings to be made available on YouTube in the coming weeks. Thank you again for being with us here today. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.